2015, we've already started in 2014, is system integration. We think it is vital to the continuing growth of American manufacturing. We already have on our two websites, www.planengineering.com and www.controleng.com, our system integrator database, which you can access and get a lot of information on areas involving how to find the correct system integrator for your business. Bailey Rice, Bailey, raise your hand. Bailey Rice, raise your hand. Bailey is in charge of our system integration program for CFE Media, and we are going to continue that emphasis going on into 2015. So our first presentation here this morning ties very closely into that. System integrators have come into increasing prominence in manufacturing, and we're going to offer an insider's view from a company that does system integration and how to get the most out of that process. Tim Yeager is a project director and member of the senior management team of DMC, a project-based engineering and software firm headquartered here in Chicago. He heads the embedded project development team as well as a number of Siemens projects. Since starting his career in engineering, his primary focus has been on automation and control systems. He has a BS in mechanical engineering from the University of Illinois, Go Fighting Illini, and a PE in control systems. We're very pleased to welcome from DMC, Tim Yeager. Tim?
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
I'm going to do a little IT support here for a second.
There it is.
There we go.
The clicker should work.
Okay, so as Bob mentioned, my name's Tim Yeager. I went to the University of Illinois, and I'm a project director at a system integration company. And I've been doing this for 15 years. So I started at DMC in 1999. I'm going to tell you a little bit about DMC first, and then we'll get right into the presentation. We're a system integration company, software engineering firm with offices in Chicago, Boston, and Denver. We've got about 70 employees, and we work in a lot of different industries. Just about every industry you can imagine. We're members of CSIA, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, and we're Microsoft Gold certified partners. We break our areas of expertise down into really 4 categories. The biggest one, and the one that's probably most applicable to this show, is what we call manufacturing automation and intelligence. And what that boils down to is any system in any factory that has some kind of programmability or software component to it, we probably get involved with it. We do some other things too. We have a group that focuses a lot on test and measurement applications. So think of high-speed data acquisition systems, high-speed signal analysis, end-of-line product testers. We do a lot of work with National Instruments products and do a lot of programming in LabVIEW with that group. Another category that we work on, this is kind of a catch-all category, but we call it custom hardware and software development. We will help companies develop products, electronic products from the ground up. We'll do electronic design, firmware programming, and then we'll do complete application development for PCs or mobile apps, et cetera. And then I mentioned earlier we're Microsoft Gold partners. So we'll do SharePoint implementations, Microsoft CRM, and Office 365. All right. Enough about DMC. Let's talk a little bit about why we're here today. And by starting with what is a system integrator. So if you ask a dozen system integrators what they do, they'll give you a dozen different answers. Probably the most concise definition is it's a company that brings together a bunch of disparate components into a unified system. That's what a system integrator does. That's what I've been doing pretty much my whole career. Why am I here today talking to all of you? The purpose of this talk today is to take all the lessons that I've learned over the last 15 years and kind of distill the most important points down into a 45-minute presentation that's giving back to people that would be our customers or end users, anyone that would work with a system integrator. Like all lessons in life, I've learned all these the hard way. So hopefully everyone gets one or two little nuggets from this presentation that they can take away. Here's a quick agenda. We're going to talk about when you might use a system integrator, the reasons why you might decide to work with one. And then if you do decide, how to select one, or if you decide not to, maybe a couple alternatives. And then we're going to get into some do's and don'ts in order to have a successful relationship with a system integrator. I may use the term system integrator, SI, I may even throw the word solution partner. They're all synonymous. So let's start with, when would you use a system integrator? One of the primary reasons for working with a system integrator is, everyone in this room works for a company that does something special, something that gives you a competitive advantage in the marketplace, something that other companies don't do. And that's your core. Anything that is not part of that core is simply a means to an end. When you need a new toilet, you call a plumber. When you need a new roof, you call a roofer. When you need a new automation system, you call a system integrator. If the automation part of your business is just a means to an end, then you may decide that you just want to push that off to a system integrator and not dilute your internal staff in making them be experts on system integration, as well as all the things that make your company special. A lot of our customers do exactly this. We have some very large companies that we work with that have actually kind of downsized their teams over the years, and they have teams that focus purely on the things that they do best, and anything external they outsource. Another reason is simply expertise. As automation systems get more and more complicated and advanced every day, it's not fair to expect every company to have all their engineers always up to speed on the latest and greatest technologies and at a comfort level where they can implement them. So you might use a system integrator when you need that little bit of extra expertise. When a system gets put into a plant, a lot of times the life cycle of that system is 10 years, 15 years, sometimes 20 years. Well, in that 20 years, a lot of advancements have been made, and there's companies whose jobs are to stay up on that technology. They're system integrators. So you can leverage that experience, especially when you're doing an upgrade or something like that. There are a lot of gotchas and pitfalls when upgrading a system. Hopefully you can find a system integrator that has gone through the learning curve and can accelerate your upgrade process. Here's a really important one. This is a lot of our automation projects kind of fall into this category. We work for a lot of manufacturers and OEMs where, especially I guess OEMs, where they have a product that they make and they have an automation platform that they're comfortable with. That's their standard platform they sell, and they'll get an order from a customer and says, "Hey, we want your machine, but we don't want your control system. You're using Allen Bradley. We want you to use Siemens. Give us your exact machine, but put our preferred control system on there." So you have two choices when this happens. Either you get your team to get all the correct software for whatever this new platform is, ramp up on it, translate your code or rewrite it to work with the new platform, hope that everything works right. Or you could say, hey, that's not our core, this is a one-off, we want to service this customer, we want them to be happy, we're going to pull in a system integrator to take care of these oddball requests, and we're going to focus on our core platform. And then maybe over time, if we start selling more and more of these, we might decide to add this to our core offering, and then our team will ramp up on it, but not right away. So for the one-offs, we'll use a system integrator. This is one that a lot of people probably don't realize. When you need an influx of new ideas, so what do dirt and automotive seats have in common? They're both kind of squishy. So we did a project several years ago for a soil lab where they wanted a testing apparatus that would compact dirt to an exact pressure and hold it. And it was a really challenging control system because dirt doesn't behave like normal mechanical components. So we did it, and it worked, and it was challenging. We came up with some unique algorithms to get it to work. Fast forward a couple of years, and an automotive seat manufacturer came to us and said, hey, we need a system that will compact an automotive seat to an exact pressure and hold it. It was the exact same system, it just wasn't dirt, it was automotive seats. So we were able to take all this stuff that we learned in one industry and apply it to another. These two industries never would have crossed paths. So you can think of a system integrator as your eyes and ears into all these different industries, because as I said in the beginning, we don't have a vertical that we specialize in. We kind of work in a lot of industries, and most system integrators are like that. So they can take things that they've learned from one industry and apply it to another. The problem that your industry is trying to solve may have been solved many years ago somewhere else and no one knows about it. Another reason to use an integrator is when you need a jump start. And this can mean a lot of things, but specifically the cases where we get involved with the jump start type situation, it's where a company wants to get ramped up on a new technology. They want their team to understand it and be able to move forward with that technology, whatever the platform may be. And they need to do it quickly. Maybe they have a kind of a young or green team that they're ramping up. So a really good system integrator will be able to come in and work with your team and get them ramped up. Their job in this case is not to come in and look like the heroes and show you how smart they are. Their job is to come in and get you up to speed as quickly as possible. And anyone that's ever taught someone how to ride a bike knows that there's only one way to teach someone how to ride a bike. You put them on the bike and you get them pedaling and you hold on to the back of the seat. And when they start to veer off, you give them a correction. You get them back on track. And over time, you'll be doing less and less corrections until you can just let go. So the relationship with a system integrator can be just like that. They can put you in the driver's seat, get you moving forward with a specific platform or technology or software, and when you veer off, they'll correct you and get you back on track. We do a lot of work with a lot of manufacturers. We're pretty involved with Siemens and their automation equipment, and a lot of times we'll get projects that are referrals from Siemens where they'll say, hey, we've got a customer and they're struggling ramping up on our PLC technology for some reason. And they say, hey, this is going to be a tiny project, you're probably not going to make a lot of money, but hey, can you go in and get them running, make sure they don't fall down, and make everyone look good? And we say, sure, because it builds goodwill with the customer. Maybe someday they will need some help and they'll remember us. And it makes Siemens happy for us. So a good SI will be able to give you a solid jump start. Short-term help. Sometimes you may have a situation where you're completely self-sufficient. You've got a team, you're ramped up on whatever it is, whatever technology, whatever automation technology you use, and everything's great. But you might want to pull in a system integrator, because you can have them do things and then kick them out, right? You can pull them in and say, hey, we need some help with this, and then they're gone. If your business, if this blue line at the bottom of the screen here is a graph of your business cycle, it's perfectly consistent and flat, then this slide doesn't apply to you. But if it looks more like this, where there's ups and downs, and you may have a massive influx of project work that you need to get done, and you don't want to double your staff and then have to undouble your staff, because that can be awkward and bad for morale. You might want to pull in a system integrator temporarily and say, hey, augment our team for a little while, and then when things balance out, get out the door. We have customers that are just like that. They call us when they need us, and we step in, and when we're done, the project's over, and there's no expectation that we come back until they get in a jam again, and that's okay. The last time when you might need a system integrator is when you are in big trouble. We've all found ourselves in a situation where something just isn't working, something bad is happening, where there's a deadline, and we have to figure out a solution, so we need to call in the wolf. Most system integrators will have some people that are particularly good at troubleshooting random challenging problems, and maybe they've seen the problem that you're experiencing. So there's a lot of cases where you need to call in the cavalry, and SI is a good option for that. We've got a couple wolves at DMC. There's a guy named Boris that works at DMC, and he's this Russian guy, and he has this particular knack for being able to solve any problem with any system, no matter what. So I had a customer call not too long ago, and they were in a complete panic. And this guy, his name is Jeff. he was talking a mile a minute, and he was saying, Tim, the system's not working. We've got our customer coming in. They're going to look at the system in 2 days, and we've got to get up and running. He's panicking. I said, Jeff, how about this? I'll send Boris over tomorrow, and he'll help you out. And I could just hear this sigh of relief. He says, oh, Boris is coming? Okay. And it completely diffused the situation. So having an SI that has some really good people and knowing who those people are can be a good benefit when you need them. So let's assume that you've decided you're going to work with a system integrator, but you want to know how to select one. What are the things that you should think about? What should you ask them? The first is you want to evaluate the stability of this firm, right? Hopefully you're looking for a long-term partnership where you don't just need them for right now, you want to be able to call upon them from time to time. So you really want to evaluate the stability of the company. How do you do that? What are the things to look for in an SI? Several things. First is how long have they been around, right? If they've been around a long time, maybe they're doing something right. Coupled with that is, are they profitable? Do they actually make money? You want a system integrator, you want to work with a system integrator that is profitable, because that means they're healthy. That means they can hire good employees and retain them, that they're not going to disappear anytime soon. So it's a good thing to work with an SI that's profitable. Ask them about their turnover. Are they a revolving door? System integration can be a tough job, and it's not the right job for everybody. So ask specifically about the turnover at the company. Who are the last 3 people that left and why? Tell me about it. And get a feel for why are people leaving the company. Every company is going to have turnover, but get a feel for it. Is it because they were burned out, or is it because they got some other awesome opportunity? Ask them for kind of a breakdown, a pie chart or something of where all their business comes from. That's an okay question to ask. You want to know, do they get all their business from 1 or 2 big customers? And what happens if that customer disappears? Do they cut their business in half? Do they have to cut staff? Or are they fairly diversified? You really want to know this when working with a system integrator. Let's see, ask them about their infrastructure, their systems. A lot of times you may be working with a system integrator and the end product of what they develop for you, you may spend $100,000 with them and they give you some drawings and some software is really the deliverable. You want to make sure that those are stored properly, they're backed up, that they've got a really good infrastructure in place. You don't want to know that your critical software that they've been developing for you is on someone's laptop somewhere, and hopefully they'll back it up one of these days. So ask them specifically to walk you through their systems. The next 3 things to look at can be easily remembered by thinking of the story of Goldilocks. You're looking for things to be just right. You want a good fit with the system integrator. So look at the firm size. Are they too big or too small? What that means is, how big is your project compared to their typical project that they're doing? Is your project a little teeny tiny project that they have to kind of slide in and they don't care too much about? Or conversely, is this the biggest project that they will have ever done? That could be a little scary. Along with that firm size, I said early on, we've got 70 people at DMC. So in your mind, you're thinking, oh, they've got 70 people that can do exactly what it is that I need them to do. Ask them specifically, how many people do you have that do whatever it is you need them to do? If it's Allen Bradley PLC programming, well, how many Allen Bradley PLC programmers do you have of your 70 or 20 or 30? So you may be talking to a company with 30 people, but maybe they have 1 or 2 people that do the thing that you need them to do. It's okay to ask that question. Too hard or too soft? So with all system integration, there's a hardware component and a software component. And some system integrators, they're better at the software side and some are better at the hardware side. So evaluate where their sweet spot is and where your project fits. So if your project has a ton of hardware and a little bit of software, you probably want a company that's better at the hardware side of things. At DMC, most of our projects are really heavy on the software side. So if a customer comes to us and says, hey, we want you to build all this hardware and there's a little tiny bit of software, we might tell them, hey, this might not be the best fit for us. The last thing is, how busy are they? Are they too hot or too cold? Are they so busy that they're not going to be able to fit you in, or your project might be delayed. It's okay. Ask them, what's your pipeline like? How is this project going to work? How busy are you? What's your capacity? Conversely, are they too cold? Are they not busy at all? The plus side of that is you're going to get the attention that you need. The downside is kind of like walking into an empty restaurant. It just doesn't feel right. Something seems odd. So if they're too cold, they're not busy enough, maybe the engineer that's working on your project sees the writing on the wall and he's actively looking for another job. So you don't want them to be too cold or too hot. You're looking for just right. Another thing to think about is technology versus industry expertise. So ideally, when you hire a system integrator, they know all the technology that you're using and they know your industry inside and out. It's not always the case, though. You may have to decide what's more important. For us, most of the projects that we get are based on the technology. The customer's more concerned that we know the technology that we're programming. But there's certain cases where industry experience is more important. A couple examples. We have a large customer in the semiconductor industry, and when we started working with them first, they were very concerned with us knowing the technology, and it just so happened that we were really, really good with the technology that they were using in their process. And they really didn't care that we knew much about the ins and outs of semiconductor processing. I think they were actually kind of happy that we were sort of disconnected from the industry because it allowed them to keep the proprietary nature separated from us more easily. Conversely, we've done a lot of work in the automotive industry, and the first question that we're always asked is, what work have you done in the automotive industry? And there is no second question if you don't answer the first one properly. They want to make sure that you understand the demands of the automotive industry, that you understand just-in-time manufacturing and lean manufacturing. And sure, the technology stuff is important, you have to understand that, but you won't get a foot in the door easily if you haven't already worked in that industry. So figure out where that fit is when selecting an integrator. They may or may not have worked in your industry, or they may have worked in your industry and know it inside and out, but maybe they're not as keen on the technology. Figure out what's important to you. Okay. The next thing to think about, who remembers the story of the little engine that could? The tiny engine makes it up the steep hill through sheer determination and perseverance. So what can we learn about selecting a system integrator from this story? That we want a company with determination and perseverance? Not really, that's not what we learn. The reason this is a good story is that we don't find out until the end whether the little engine makes it over the hill. That's what makes it exciting and suspenseful. Who wants their project to be exciting and suspenseful? Who wants to find out at the very last second whether it's going to work or not? Well, what we can learn from this is that there's a big difference between can do and have done. Specifically ask them, have you done the thing that I want you to do on my project? And if not, what have you done that's close to it, right? Have you made a seat squishing system? No, but we've made a dirt squishing system, right? So dig into that a little bit, because we can do things. I mean, there's things that as system integrators, we do things all the time that we've never done, but it's easier to do the things that we have done. So if you find yourself in the can-do category, realize a couple things that you need to ask them. Tell me about projects where you were in this can-do category, where you had never done it before, and tell me about some that have succeeded and failed, and kind of figure out where you fit in that spectrum. The other thing with can-do versus have done is probably one of the most challenging things that a system integrator does is estimate how long it's going to take to do something. And it's a whole lot easier to estimate something that you have done versus something that you can do. So if you're in the can-do category, you might want to scrutinize the estimates you're given a little more. Next thing to think about is certifications. So we're members of the Control System Integrators Association, and it's a question to ask your potential system integrators. Are you a member of the Control System Integrators Association? If the answer is yes, that's good. If the answer is no, that's not necessarily bad. But Control System Integrators Association it's kind of like an ISO 9000 for control system integrators. It's a badge of approval. You have to go through a several hundred point inspection where they look at all of your systems and your processes. So remember I was talking before about asking them about how they back up things and how their infrastructure works. By having the CSIA symbol, it kind of answers a lot of those questions for you because you can't get this without having sufficient systems in place. Makes that job a lot easier. Ask them if they're certified in the particular hardware platform that you're working with. And if they are, that's good. If they're not, ask them about projects that they've done, because really what is most important is their track record with that hardware or software platform. So it's not the end of the world if they're not certified, but it's a bonus if they are, so you should ask. All right, references. This probably seems like a super lame slide, but in reality, this is possibly the most important slide of this presentation. References seem kind of like a useless formality because clearly I'm going to give you the references of people that are going to speak highly of me, right? I guess it's a concern if you can't get a couple references from an SI, that's a red flag. But there's a special kind of reference that you can get that's just pure gold, and I would recommend you try for this. If you have a system integrator that's working, I'll give you a specific example. I mentioned we do a lot of work with Siemens, right? So let's say that they're working on a Siemens PLC for you. If you can get a referral from someone at Siemens that says, yes, this team is good, this system integrator will do a good job for you, that's huge, because one thing that may not be obvious is that system integrators get a lot of their business through referrals. They get business from the manufacturers that they work with and the distributors that they work with. So if they get a referral from a manufacturer, they're hypersensitive to that, and they have to do a good job on your project. They're going to want to do a good job anyway, but they have to do a good job because this person or this company that vouched for them and throws business their way, they put their name on the line. So a lot of times, we were talking earlier about how maybe your project is really tiny and it won't get the attention that it deserves. If you get a referral and your project is tiny, you'll get extra attention because there's this whole relationship in play that is separate from you and the SI that we want to keep intact. So that's a really critical thing. I would ask for a referral from the manufacturer that you're working with. So in addition to asking a bunch of questions of the SI, really critically analyze the questions they ask you. It can be very telling. You really want them to be excited about your project. You want to get a good feel that based on the questions they ask that they're going to be able to meet your needs. We had a sales lead come in through our website not too long ago, and it was this company that wanted an electronic system for controlling part of an engine. And the engineer that took this sales lead, his name was Johnny. He's an electrical engineer, and he's also a total gearhead, so he loves cars and motors. So this was the perfect project for him, and he got so excited that instead of sending the standard email back, oh, this sounds like an interesting project, I'd love to talk to you more about it, he sent this 9-page email. It was ridiculously long. It had tons of questions. It had all these ideas and brainstorms. He was fully engaged in this project, and the customer, maybe he was too engaged, but the customer realized that, wow, this person's really excited about this project. They're going to do a good job. We got the project, and it's been a great success, and it's because we found that fit. And so listen to the questions they ask you. How engaged are they? How much do they really want to know? Do they keep asking questions and questions and questions? That can be a really good thing. Do they play well with others? So system integrators, I said that they collect all these systems and they make them work together. Well, there's people involved with all these different systems a lot of times. So they really have to work well together. You really have to interview them from the standpoint of, is this person that's going to be working with your team, are they going to get along? Are they going to mesh well with your engineering team? Are they going to work side by side, or are they going to butt heads? So definitely try to interview the actual engineers, people that will be working on your project, and get a feel for how well they would play with others. There's a couple really challenging questions you can ask a system integrator. You can ask them, will you train my team so that I never have to call you again? That's a tough question. But a good SI will say, absolutely, right? Because they know that if you want to get trained on this technology, you're going to do it anyway. Why not they be the ones to do it for you? The next and more challenging question is, will you train a local competitor so that I never have to call you again? That seems like a crazy question. It's something that we actually do quite often. We have a large customer that's based in Chicago, but it's a global company. They have factories throughout the world, and we do full system deployments in these factories. They're massive projects, and let's say we have a team of people we send over to China to deploy the system. The customer says, hey, will you train a local integrator in China to support this system so that we don't have to ship you back and forth from the US to China? And we say, sure. One, because they're going to do it anyway. Two, we're looking at the big picture, right? This is a huge account for us. It's important to keep the customer happy. So a good SI will not be short-sighted on that. And lastly, it's actually kind of a benefit to our engineers. It can be challenging to send people overseas for long periods of time. So the shorter we can make that for our engineers, the better. Kind of peer behind the curtain a little and identify their commercial interest. So what does that mean? We kind of already talked about the referral. So what other political situations are in play that you can maybe leverage or better understand? But other commercial interest things to think about are, how do they make their money? A lot of system integrators have a really basic model. We charge X amount of dollars per hour for our time, and however much time we spend, we multiply that rate, and that's the cost. Others may have a more hybrid model. Some may make a lot of money on actually selling you the hardware, the software licenses, or things like that. Understand where they get their money from. There's no right or wrong answer, but understanding it will help you make better decisions throughout the process. For example, if the system integrator is selling you hardware and they make a profit on that, a good system integrator will always pick the right solution for the customer, but sometimes solution A and solution B will both work, and solution A has a higher profit margin. So there may be some commercial interests that you want to be aware of. Transparency, open door policy. So can you stop by any time? Can you just call up and say, hey, I'm in the neighborhood, can I swing by and see how my project's going? We work with a company that they're really big on their open door policy. This is a company that makes electrical control panels, and they say you can stop by any time, walk in the door, and we'll show you where your project is in the process. And I was talking to one of the principals at this company, and I said, oh, that's great. How often do people stop by? And he said, never. It's just knowing that they can is important. So I recommend if your system integrator has an open door policy, actually use it. Actually stop by once in a while. See how things are going. All right, let's talk about some alternatives. Maybe a system integrator isn't quite right for what you're looking for. So we have to acknowledge that there may be some other options out there. Let's talk about them briefly. You can use a technical staffing agency or a freelancer. Maybe you need someone maybe you just need a person for an extended period of time. You're not looking for someone to come in and do a full project for you. You just need a person with a specific skill set. That's where, like a Sterling Engineering or an Aerotech or a technical staffing agency could provide someone. The advantage of that over a system integrator is generally the hourly rate is lower for something like this. The downside is that you're buying this person for a certain amount of time, and when you set them free, they may not ever come back. They may move on to the next job. The idea with a system integrator, hopefully, is that when they leave the project, you can call them back later, and they can do some follow-up, and hopefully it's the same people that were working on it originally. There's some wild cards out there. Don't rule out Craigslist and Guru.com and things like that. We've had some mixed success with that. A while back, we tried to as an experiment, we tried to outsource some stuff to India and using guru.com, and it was really challenging. We ultimately were able to kind of get something working, but when we looked at the hours that we had to spend managing the person and finding the right person, it just wasn't worth it. Craigslist, the ultimate wild card. Do you remember Boris the wolf I was talking about earlier? We found him on Craigslist. It was probably the luckiest thing that's ever happened to our company. We needed someone with a very specific skill set, and we needed them really quickly. This is about 10 years ago, so we placed ads everywhere, including Craigslist. Boris had just come over from Russia. He was just really, really strong technically, but since he had just come over, he got the first job that he could get, which was delivering pizzas. And so he went from pizza delivery to one of our most stellar engineers of all time, and that was a pure diamond in the rough, right? So if you are going to go down this route, you have to be prepared to do a lot of interviewing to really screen these people. And unfortunately, if you're looking for help, it means that time is something you don't have, so it's a little bit of a catch-22. Yeah, and remember that there's always going to be a less expensive option. You kind of get what you pay for. That's the lesson that we learned with the guru.com. It was really painful to get what we wanted. The last option is just hire someone, right? So preferably try to find someone that works at a system integrator and just hire them away. That's actually happened to us. We have a really big customer that we've done tons of business with, and one of our engineers kind of wanted to move out east, and that's where this customer is located, and they said, hey, we want to hire your guy, and we said, okay, because it was such a huge customer, and we're looking at the big picture, and he was going to move anyway, so it worked out great, honestly. So you can, if you find people that are at a system integrator and you can entice them to come work for you, go for it. All right, let's get into the do's and don'ts of a successful relationship. These are kind of based on all the horror stories throughout the years that I've run into, kind of distilled it down into just a bunch of do's and don'ts. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So the idea here is do a starter project. If you're going to engage with a system integrator, start out small. Give them a 1-week project or a couple-day project. Nothing scares me more than engaging with a new customer and having them drop a massive purchase order on us, and we've never worked together, right? It seems great to get that big purchase order, but we haven't established this dynamic, so I don't know, are they gonna like us? Are we gonna work together smoothly? It would be nice if we could just kind of start out slow, you know? It's like getting married after the first date. You wanna take a step back and plan your project out if possible with the system integrator so that you can ease into things. It minimizes risk on everyone's part. This one seems obvious. The key to any successful relationship is communication. We all know this. Specifically with working with an SI, set up the line of communications right up front. Get a phone tree list from them of all the people that are going to be working on the project and their managers, and understand the org chart. Ask them, hey, can you show me an org chart so I know where these people fit into your organization? Figure out how you're going to communicate. Are we going to have a weekly status meeting? Are we going to just focus? Are we going to have emails? Are we going to do web meetings? In-person meetings, but figure that out up front, and then ask the questions of, okay, how are we going to communicate problems when they happen? If you figure out how you're going to communicate those, you know, what happens when we start exceeding the budget and things like that? Let's talk about that early so that it hasn't happened yet. Let's figure out how you're going to deal with it when it does. Add your own expertise. Definitely do this. So when you think of a system integrator coming in, you kind of think of them, oh, they're the experts. They're going to teach us all these things. But keep in mind that you're all really intelligent people and have been working at your company doing these really special things for a long time, and you've gained all this knowledge. Share that with them. The project will be better. I mentioned in the previous slide about getting this phone tree and understanding who all the players are in the project. Give this system integrator your information, your phone tree. Say, hey, here are all the internal experts that we have on this, that, and the other thing, so that when the system integrator runs into trouble, they know who is the expert on your end to call for help. it will shorten the development cycle if they can have questions answered really quickly. Tell them all the things that you've done wrong, right? Tell them the failures that you had. You don't want them to replicate a failure. You don't want them to do something that you've already done. It's just a waste of time. So definitely add your own expertise. Be realistic. Here's what that means. So at some point in any project, there's going to be a specification that you're trying to hit. And some of the things in that specification is just a document. They were things that were typed in. Some of them are super critical, and some were typed in maybe arbitrarily. And if the system integrator doesn't know the real importance of every single one of those specifications, they may find themselves battling a spec or requirement that they can't quite reach. If you set a requirement for how fast a machine is going to run, and that requires you to push everything to the max, and they get it to the, say, 95% point, but it's going to be an extraordinary effort to get it to the 100, constantly reevaluate that. Instead of just saying, hey, that's the spec, that's what we have to do, really reevaluate that. We've got some projects that we've done where we've kind of pushed the system to the max to get it to pass the spec, but then when we go into the plant, a couple weeks later, they're running at 85% because there's some other bottleneck in the line, or maybe the system just doesn't run that well that fast, and it never really could, but we spent a lot of time proving that it could, even though it never has to. Really think time is money in a lot of cases, and you may want to reevaluate your specifications as you get closer to hitting them. Predict failure. So there's a concept known as the pre-mortem that I like to talk about. When you get a system integrator and you're talking with them about a new project, they're going to tell you all the reasons that this project is going to succeed and all the successes that they've had, and they're going to be excited about telling you how they're going to push you to the finish line. Let them take off their salesman hat for a second and tell them, hey, I've got this crystal ball. I believe you. I believe this project is going to be a success, but the crystal ball is telling me that we failed. I want you to think about all the reasons that this project could possibly fail. And you'll be surprised. The engineers that you're talking to that were a moment ago telling you all the ways it was going to succeed, they'll start to think about, they'll take the blinders off and they'll start to think about ways that it could fail. Write those down and say, okay, these are all good possibilities. Now how do we address them? Have that as part of your initial kickoff with them. A lot of times you can solve problems early and much more cheaply and inexpensively by doing this than waiting until they happen. So the ideal system integrator would always be there when you need them. We have a guy named Ken at DMC, and he was working with a customer. This guy's name was Vin, and they got in sort of this weird habit where Vin would call up and say, hey, Ken, I've got a project I need you to come work on. And Ken would say, okay, I'll be there tomorrow. And a couple weeks later, Vin would call up and say, hey, Ken, I need you to come out and work on something. And Ken would say, okay, I'll come out tomorrow. Well, it just so happened that Ken happened to be free the day after Vin was calling. It was just coincidental. So one day, Vin calls up and said, hey, Ken, I've got a project for you. I need you to work on it. And Ken says, okay, I'll come out next week. And Vin said, wait, what? I've got the whole team ready for you. They're waiting for you. They're expecting you tomorrow. He'd gotten this pattern of setting the expectations of the customer that he was always there, right? So system integrators, they're generally kind of billing for their time, and keeping busy is one of the most important things that system integrators do internally. So understanding their schedule and kind of assuming that you can't necessarily always call them at a moment's notice. If you need to be able to call them at a moment's notice, have that phone tree in place. Say, hey, okay, if Ken's not available, who then do I call? And have that backup plan so that you're not panicking when he says, I can't come out until next week. Also, try to give them as much heads up as possible. So now, Vin and Ken have a great relationship. Vin gives Ken a heads up. He says, hey, I need you to come out in 2 weeks. And Ken says, okay. When working on specifications, you really need to kind of be specific, or you may get what you asked for. So system integrators are pretty good at reading between the lines and taking a vague specification and giving you what you wanted versus what you asked for. but sometimes that's not the case. If a rough spec comes into a system integrator, they may deliver kind of a rough system. If there are ambiguities or things missing from a specification, you need to be very clear that they're missing and not assume that they'll fill in the blanks. Ask them to fill in the blanks and have them send it back to you with their assumptions, right? Instead of saying, okay, we can do what you said in this spec, have them kind of repeat it back to you in text, or fill out an assumption list of, hey, this is vague, here's what we're going to do instead. Have that discussion early on, or you might end up with a situation where they didn't properly interpret what you were asking for. Okay, don't expect software to fix hardware problems unless you're NASA. When NASA sends something into space, it's in space. So if something's wrong, they scramble to try to find a firmware fix. Let's update the software. Hopefully that will fix it. When I was a younger engineer, I used to be really good at fixing hardware problems with software because I knew I could. Oh, I'm so smart. I can find this workaround, and even though the hardware isn't quite adequate, I'll figure it out in software. But as I got more experience, I learned that, well, let's look at the time value of money versus the cost of maybe pulling that bad hardware out and doing that analysis. And a lot of times, you can spend a whole lot of time, which equals a whole lot of cost, fixing some hardware problem with software when maybe you should have just yanked out that hardware and done it the right way. Conversely, you can't fix bad software with hardware. So identifying really where the problem is the most important thing, and then figuring out the proper solution. This is a really important slide. Oops. This is a really important slide. So ideally, when you work with a system integrator, they will create all these drawings, all this software for you, and they'll turn it over to you without exclusion so that you have full license for it. But that's not always the case. Really understand how the software licensing works when you're working with a system integrator, because everyone is different. There's nuances to every integrator and how they do that. We've had a lot of cases where we've worked with customers that have worked with another integrator or supplier and had just kind of assumed that they were getting the software, and maybe they had a falling out with the integrator and looked at the fine print in their contract and no, they weren't getting it. So we've had to rewrite it from scratch because they didn't have it, they didn't ask this question up front. Really understand and be okay with the way that they license their software. That's really critical. Learn from the integrator. So let's say you're working with these people on a project and these engineers are coming to your facility and working with your team for X number of days or weeks or months. Pick their brain the whole time they're there, right? So they may have experience with all sorts of other things that are maybe not related to the exact project that you're working on, but they're generally very happy to answer questions. So, you know, if you're out to lunch, ask them questions about, oh, how would you do this? How would you do that? What do you think about this? Hey, let's go look at the other part of the plant. Let's do a plant tour and give us some advice. Pick their brains. You know, if they're in your facility working on something for you, you don't have to wait until you have the next project to kind of pre-engage with them. Get a feel for how they might handle another project and learn from them. Have them build training into their proposal so that at the end of a project, they, instead of just walking out the door, they sit down with you and maybe they run through all the code they developed with your team, so that maybe your team didn't develop it, but at least they can maintain it and understand it. Definitely try to learn as much as you can from them. I kind of alluded to this a little bit before, but don't ignore an over-budget situation. Set up those lines of communication very early on so that if budget ever becomes a concern, that you talk about it before it's too late. We've been in a lot of situations where maybe a customer's in a panic situation and they just need something done, and they say something like, just do whatever it takes. That's a red flag when we hear that, do whatever it takes, because that implies a blank checkbook, and there's no such thing as a blank checkbook. So talk about those budget situations early on before they get out of control. You never want to say, hey, just get it done and we'll figure it out later, because there may be a huge gap in where your budget was and where it needs to be to finish out the project. And also, no one has a time machine. So when a system integrator is working on a project, let's say they're doing a lot of software, there's levels of software complexity and feature sets that can go in. Maybe you can cut down on some feature sets that aren't really critical and get the project back on track. So really be thinking about critical path the whole time. If there's something that isn't absolutely necessary, maybe put that to the end. We had a project we were working on, and the customer that was kind of directing our team, he was relatively new at the client, and he was kind of giving us guidance on what he wanted to work on. We ended up in a situation where there was a system that wasn't quite working yet. They had to ship it out to their client, and this particular project manager was really focused on how the look and feel of the touchscreen was. He wanted it to look like an iPhone, and he was worried about the corner bevels of the buttons and things like that. And it was having the team spend a lot of time on these sort of nuances, and yet the system didn't even work. So the critical path there completely fell down. Give your system integrator the latitude to tell you, hey, time out, this doesn't make sense. Because we want to please you, we want to do what you're asking us to do. Give us that latitude early on. Say, hey, if I tell you something and you don't think it's right, I want to know. Tell me right away that this is a bad idea. If I tell you to focus on the color of a button and the system doesn't work, say time out and let's talk about it. So don't ship early. This is a tough one. I don't want to pretend that I know everyone's business and the challenges of being late on a shipment, but I will say this. When you ship a system early, you may do that because it's not quite ready, but you have a penalty with your client if you don't ship it on time. Really do a cost-benefit analysis of paying that penalty versus the extra cost of shipping the system integrator to wherever this machine ends up. The development costs can rapidly escalate. If we're working on your shop floor, helping you get a machine up and running, we've got access to your whole team. We can take the system up and down as we need, but once it gets into the end customer's plant, they're in charge. And the development process can come to a grinding halt, especially if we're trying to develop while production is running. So that's a question to pose early on. If you find yourself in that situation where you may have to ship early, really sit down with the integrator and say, hey, let's walk through this. How is this going to impact the budget? Because it's not going to be a linear progression. If you need an extra week, to get it working, that may be an extreme week of lots of overtime and weekend time, and suddenly your costs are doubled for that week and you weren't expecting it. So think about cost options. Generally, there's some other nuanced versions of this, but generally you're working with a system integrator either on a fixed bid project where you give them a spec and they give you a price, and that's agreed up front, or it's hourly where you're just paying for their time. Figure out what makes sense for you and really realize that it all comes down to risk. It seems great to say I always want a fixed price for everything. That way I'm minimizing my risk. But if the integrator is taking on a lot of risk, they have to put a lot of buffer in their quote. So sometimes the hourly may be better. It may end up being less expensive than the fixed. Also, if you're doing kind of an R&D project, it's really tough to do that on a fixed bid basis because you want them to be able to adjust quickly as your needs change. You want them to be able to kind of stop what they're doing over here and shift focus somewhere else. It's really hard to do that on a fixed bid basis because they may have to hit you up with change orders and say, hey, we didn't talk about this is going to cost more, versus when you're hourly, they do what you tell them to do. This is my last slide here. Negotiate. Anything is negotiable. So when you talk to a system integrator, they're going to tell you their rates, and those rates are based on what they can get, the market demand. But realize that there's things where you can have some latitude there. Generally, system integrators, they want to stay busy. They want to keep their people billing all the time. So if you can offer them some large block of hours, some kind of guarantee, they might give you a lower rate for that certainty. There may be a situation where they're in a can-do and not a have-done situation where they say, hey, we can do this. And you say, okay, I believe you, but we're taking a risk by going with you. Give us a break on the cost. And they might say, sure, we'll do it. There may be situations where you can't really negotiate. When you call in the wolf and it's a Saturday or something like that, you might just have to bite the bullet and pay the rate. But there's definitely a lot of latitude for negotiation. All right, any questions?
Thanks, Tim. That was great presentation. We appreciate that. We have time for some questions, so I'm the roaming microphone if anybody has any questions.
Also, feel free to call me anytime.
Yeah, I'll ask a couple at the outset. Obviously, your business has gotten bigger and better and faster over the last few years. You guys seem to be the midpoint between the supplier base that is looking to get into some of these manufacturing facilities and manufacturers who either don't have the time or the in-house expertise to be able to deliver on their vision for improving their facility. Can you talk a little bit about what the market's been like and also a little bit about what, from a manufacturer's standpoint, you're seeing the most kind of requests for?
Let's see. The most kind of requests I get are, well, I mentioned in the presentation that we are doing a lot of conversions where a lot of our customers were seeing that they typically were selling domestically and now they're shipping a lot of products overseas. They've kind of opened up the European market. And with that, there's a demand for different platforms. So the most classic one is they sell Allen Bradley as their processor in the US and they need Siemens for the European market. So we actually do a fair amount of projects like that. We call it a conversion project. A lot of times it ends up being a rewrite.
And different standards between the US and Europe.
Different standards, different preferences, programming language preferences for sure.
Our distinguished representative from Control Engineering.
Tim, a lot of great information. Of all the tips that you gave, what are the 3 top things that people usually miscommunicate when talking to system integrators or misunderstand? What could they take away as key improvements in their communications with
the
system
key
integrators?
improvements? Let me think about that for a second. So I guess we struggle the most with customers that have maybe been kind of burned in the past by another company. So it's hard to establish that initial trust. So that's why we push the early communication, the open door policy, things like that. We invite them to come to the company and really evaluate the team. I guess it's that building that initial trust, that rapport. I mean, ultimately, you buy things from people that you like and trust. So it's establishing that initial trust is probably the most important thing. If you're working or considering a system integrator and it just doesn't feel right, you just kind of don't like them, then don't work with them because it's a relationship like any other. And if you don't really like the people you're working with, it's not going to go well. So kind of establishing that initial rapport, I think, is really critical. I mentioned this, but the licensing terms are really important. Really make sure you understand that up front or you can get burned.
Can you walk through, good presentation, Tim, how you get started to work with a company like DMC? Are you working, so it's a food and beverage company, let's say, for example, and they contact you. Is that the plant manager? Is it the design engineer? How does that get started? And do you have a list of questions that you ask back to the client so you make sure that you guys are on the same page?
So a lot of times it may be a plant manager. If it's a larger corporation, they may have a global engineering team, and it may be someone from that global engineering team. I guess the questions that we ask they're always related to understanding their capabilities in-house and how we can supplement them. Sometimes their capabilities are extensive and we're just helping them out in a few areas. It's finding out, the Venn diagram of what we do and what they do and where's their overlap and where isn't and figuring out that fit. So we ask a lot about their technical expertise in-house. We ask about, budget is always a good one. You can have a really short conversation if you are talking with a customer and they have a large, ambitious project, but not a lot of budget for it, there's not a whole lot of room for moving forward there unless we break it up into little tiny steps. So that's, usually we try to get that information up front. Other questions?
Other
that we ask?
questions? Well, I want to thank Tim for the presentation. Great job. Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you all. Thanks, Bob.